This is Erin with the Joy and Pens and Paper, and I'm going to do a journaling session for June 27th and June 28th. So, both of these days we were in Istanbul. The first day we got into Istanbul a little bit later in the day. So, we had the morning on the boat. Um, just quickly to talk about what you're seeing on the screen right now, I have printed out some pictures using a Kodak Steps printer, and I'm cutting those out. I'm arranging them by day, and then I'm going to place them or move them around the page to see how I want them to be laid out before removing the sticky back paper and placing them down. So on June 27th, we definitely had a very busy and full day, which I think was the case for most of the days on this trip. We woke up and got breakfast at a restaurant called Taste. So there were two restaurants on the boat that were complimentary. They were across from each other. One was called Taste and one was called Savor. And in the common space between those restaurants was a bar called Mix. So both restaurants appeared to have the same menu every single day. It just was a matter of which one was busy and which one was not. And on this morning, Taste was not busy, so we went to Taste and got breakfast. I found that each morning, whether we were at Taste or Savor, I got pretty much the same thing for breakfast. I got a flavored yogurt, typically strawberry, sometimes banana, and then I got an egg dish of some kind with some bacon. And they actually did bacon pretty well on the ship. As a side note, not necessarily specific to this day, but towards the end of the cruise, we noticed at Garden Cafe, which was the buffet dining option, for breakfast, they had crispy bacon separated from regular bacon, which I thoroughly appreciated because I am definitely more of a crispy bacon person. So you see me labeling this as Istanbul Day 1, and I'm using a Lamy 2000 with a Colorverse ink in it, and then I switch it out for a Novelar Tromso with Robert Oster Summer Storm, this beautiful blue, almost blurple color, but definitely leaning a little bit more towards blue. And I'm noting kind of the highlights or bullet points of the day, and then I'll do my journaling. Between those headers and the pictures, I'll fill in journaling throughout. As I'm now a number of days into this process of documenting my trip, I will say my handwriting for the journaling piece was not my favorite. I think because I'm under the weather and I'm filled with excitement and all these wonderful things, my handwriting is rushed, and then you add on top of that the bumpiness from pictures and things like that, with the Tomoe River paper being as thin as it is. I'm not going to be pleased with my handwriting. It is what it is. It's more the memories and everything else, so it's fine. After we had breakfast at Taste, we kind of had some time to kill, so we introduced our son to shuffleboard and taught him how to play shuffleboard and played a few games of that. It was exceptionally windy on the boat, so we had hoped to do the ropes course, but it was shut down because of how windy it was. And even with shuffleboard, we had the wind interfering with our gameplay, etc. So we played just a few back and forth rounds of that. And then they had a teppanyaki demonstration on the boat. We had, based on the description, we had thought that the teppanyaki demonstration was going to be a demonstration of how they prepare some of the food. in a hibachi style restaurant. And our son really has an interest and affinity for cooking, and he loves hibachi. He loves fried rice. So I thought maybe if he got to see how fried rice was made, we could take that home and have that be an activity at home. But what they actually did was a demonstration of some of their tricks. So the juggling that they do with the cooking tools and with the eggs, and it still was really entertaining, but just not what we had expected. And it only lasted about 15 minutes, so that didn't fill up as much time as we had anticipated. We then went to the American Diner, which was on the 15th, or deck 15. I was going to say 15th floor, but deck 15. That was another one of the complimentary dining options that they had. It was a sit-down restaurant. So we went to American Diner. Aiden was able to get a hamburger. We got some nachos, and I then learned later on that their corn chips, their tortilla chips, are not gluten-free. So I think throughout the trip, I did have some struggles with really remaining gluten-free and having some stomach issues, but ultimately I handled it. It was fine. I didn't end up in the hospital, which, if I'm being candid, that was my big worry. So that did not happen. We then had an afternoon excursion, and the excursion was a Bosphorus Strait cruise. So Istanbul, interestingly, the process of getting on and off the boat in Istanbul was quite lengthy. There was a lot of tunnels and lines and security measures that we had to do to get on and off the boat, and that took up a surprising amount of time. This was also our first excursion. So, right, is that accurate? That's not accurate. Yeah, that is accurate. That is accurate. So it was our first excursion, so we weren't necessarily thrilled with the organizational process of gathering the groups, getting the groups to the buses or to the locations that they need to go to. There was a lot of time that we found ourselves thinking, if this is counted as part of the time for this excursion, it is absolutely not worth the price. Good news is it was not counted towards the time of the excursion. The excursion was still very well worth the price. We got out of the port and security. We walked to this other boat, and we did a cruise up the Bosphorus Strait and back. And we got to see all three bridges. We learned about the architecture and the historical buildings on the Europe side of Istanbul, and then the boat turned and we learned about the architecture and history of buildings on the Asia side of Istanbul. And this is where it really hit me that I would be stepping foot on a new continent during this trip. I am not a geography person. I will never claim to be. I should be embarrassed by this, I'm sure. However, I thought Istanbul, Europe, and that this was another opportunity to explore Europe countries, not realizing that part of our trip was also going to be on Asia, on the continent of Asia. So that was kind of cool. After we got done with the Bosphorus cruise, we got back on the boat. We expected it to be a lengthier process than it was getting back on the boat, but thankfully it wasn't as congested, and that was really great. And we went and we had dinner at Taste, the same restaurant that we had breakfast at. And after that, we went to Mix, the bar right outside of the restaurant, and we grabbed a couple of drinks. Aiden got to sit at the bar with us. He was served a Shirley Temple. The bartender made jokes with him about, well, you know, as long as you're not driving, you can have another one. And we got to talk with the bartender about his contract and where he was from and his experience working on boats. And this is where Aiden's interest really started getting piqued about going on cruises again in the future, and it just was nice to see him kind of feel like a person at the table and start to really think about he knows that his next really big vacation will be when he graduates high school, and he started thinking about, well, maybe he'll do a cruise for that. So and then after that, the boys went and they watched Dune in the theater, and I went to the stateroom and went to bed because Mama was tired. um, while the boys were able to sleep in and they adjusted a little bit to the time zone change, I was up very early every single day, and was also up very late. So I took the opportunity to get some early sleep. So then Friday, here I am trying to position all of the pictures from Friday, our second day in Istanbul. And we did another excursion this day, and we got to see a lot of different things. So it was, first of all, difficult to pick out which pictures I wanted to print out, and then to cluster them based on parts of the day and kind of how my memory would recall them in the future. So we started out day 2 at Garden Cafe. Our excursion was very early, so we didn't have the opportunity to go to one of the sit-down restaurants, which is where we ended up at the buffet. And then we went through all the security and all that hullabaloo to get on a bus, and we did a Byzantine Heritage of Istanbul tour. With this tour, we got to see, just to name a few things, the Hagia Sophia, which was something that my husband was exceptionally excited about, the Hippodrome, the Basilica Cistern, the Grand Bazaar, the aqueduct, and the aqueduct that we saw was actually featured in one of the Mission Impossible movies. I was going through pictures with my neighbor right after getting back from the trip, and when she saw the pictures of the aqueduct, she immediately recalled it from this movie. So that I felt was worth noting as I'm going through these videos. At one of the first locations, which I think was the Basilica Cistern, but I could be wrong, there was a square, and there were a couple of stray dogs in the square. One of them, Aiden, went up and petted, or pat. He was very friendly, but then a couple of other dogs approached this dog, and there was almost a pretty significant dog fight right in front of us. Our tour guide actually had to kind of tisk the dogs to get them to break up, and then I found myself very watchful of where I was or where we were in proximity to the dogs the rest of the time. As we continued to learn about that area, and I was watching the dogs because that's where my interest was. Anytime a car drove by the square, the dogs would chase the car, barking at it, almost as if they were protecting their turf, so to speak, which I thought was really cute. But we also learned that dogs' ears that are tagged have been vaccinated, and the first dog that Aiden had approached, he had lost both of his ears, likely due to fights with other dogs. So that was a little sad, but and we did see lots of cats. When we went to the Hagia Sophia, it turns out we were supposed to have been alerted to some dress code pieces. So the Hagia Sophia is a mosque, and they do require that women's heads be covered with a scarf or some kind of covering, as well as shoulders and anything from the knees and below. And for men, their knees could not be showing. So they had vendors nearby where you could purchase cover-ups, whether it was a hood for your head or a full body cover-up that included a head covering. And they weren't expensive, but we definitely needed to purchase that because I was wearing a tank top and shorts, and my son and my husband were both wearing shorts as well. So all three of us needed a cover up. It was about $9 to get all three of us a cover up, which really was not that big of a deal. And so we did a walkthrough of that. It was beautiful. The ceilings were beautiful. The chandeliers were beautiful. It was marble floors and marble everywhere. Just in general, I saw more marble on this trip than I think I've ever seen in my entire life. And then after we did the tour, we were brought to this rug shop and given the first of two, it happened twice on our trip, demonstrations of Turkish rugs. So Turkish rugs are exceptionally high quality. They are the only rugs that are made using a double knotting system, which results in them being very durable and lasting quite a long time. In fact, the oldest rug ever, which is now in a museum, is a Turkish rug. So they did a whole demonstration to show us how you can tell a true Turkish rug and to go over their different patterns and colorways and sizes. And what was interesting is the owner of the shop had said, this rug right here is $34,000, but if you offer me $30,000, we'll be best friends, or something to that effect. And my husband and I just looked at each other and thought, man, they must think either Americans are rich or Americans that can afford this type of a cruise or this type of a guided activity have $30,000 lying around. We don't. And it was somewhat awkward, but they weren't super pushy, which was really good. So we stayed for the demonstration. We politely got our way out of that, and then we had about an hour of free time where we got to see the Grand Bazaar. We grabbed lunch at a place called Orient Express, which was a weird name for the venue because it was not, they weren't serving Asian food. However, we were able to get a Turkish coffee, a Turkish tea, and we got a kebab meal. And then my son got, I forget what he got. I think he actually got a hamburger at this restaurant. And then when we went back to the boat, we grabbed a deck of cards. We went to O'Sheehan's and we played some rummy. I was the winner by far in all of our rummy games on the trip, to a point that the boys no longer wanted to play rummy with me. And then we had our second dining package special meal of the trip at teppanyaki this evening, which was absolutely lovely. So we had a great meal at teppanyaki, followed by a live musical performance by Emilio Valier, who was a guitarist. He also could play the harmonica and the piano, and he sang a little bit, and he did a tribute to rock artists, which he's very talented, great performer. You can just see how much he loves what he does. So it was a really lovely show. And I also had Turkish baklava. So I'm pleased to say I had Greek baklava and then Turkish baklava. I prefer Turkish baklava. It's a little bit more saturated in honey, in my opinion, than Greek baklava, but both were absolutely delicious.